Gentlemen, it's time for the final countdown.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري وتمم لي لساني يفقهوا قولي السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته and good morning. Welcome to the online talk organized by IUM Darul Hikmah Library 2021. So first of all, respected Puan Nurani Mukhtar, Chief Librarian, Darul Hikmah Library IUM. Respected speaker for today, Mr. Alexander Van Savelen, Senior Consultant, Research Intelligence, Elsevier Heads of Research, Academics and Researchers, respected Chief Librarians from other universities, Senior Officers, Head of Departments, Head of Units, and staff from Darul Hikmah Library IUM, officers within IUM, and other members, ladies and gentlemen. So welcome again to our online talk for today. So as everyone knows, for those who be involved with this topic, we are going to discuss a very, very hot issue that have been talking since starting of 2021, which is about predatory publishing. So today we're going to discuss what researchers should know about predatory publishing. So before we go further, so we are actually live on YouTube. So if you have any comments or any questions, you may use the chat box available on our YouTube live channel. So please feel free to use the platform available. So what exactly we are going to discuss with our speaker for today. So basically, as I mentioned earlier, the topic regarding predatory publishing has been a hot topic, not just in our country, but globally, where exactly people been talking about a lot of researchers, even from not just from academia, but also from industry being involved in predatory publishing in various journals, whether they're internationally or non-internationally. So this, we are going to look into closer the phenomenon of this predatory publishing and what should we consider carefully as researchers into for watch out or determination of which journals are exactly considered as predatory journals. And of course, Scopus will help us to curate its content and in particular the details on which journal or how journals are discontinued and what implication will be happening to the researchers themselves. And of course, finally, we'll provide some advice for everyone here who attend our event today for researchers on due diligence regarding targeting journals for publishing. So before we talk further ahead into the discussion for today's morning, let's invite Brother Johari to have to start dua to have blessing from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Please welcome.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اتبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين اللهم إنا نسألك العافية من كل بلية ونسألك تمام الغنى عن الناس اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين. O Allah, open our hearts to feel your perfection in our shortcomings, your mercy in our weaknesses, your forgiveness in our word doings, your knowledge in our ignorance, your blessings in our sorrows, your compassion in our trespassing, your sacredness in our humility, your flawlessness in our defects, your love in our emotions. O Allah, lead us towards the unity of the entire Ummah and give us leaders who lead this nation to virtue. O Lord, lay on us a burden greater than we have the strength to bear. Blot out our sins and grant us forgiveness. Have mercy on us. O Allah, you are our protector. Ya Allah, ya Tuhan kami memohon kepadamu, permudahkanlah perjalanan majlis kami pada hari ini. Jadikanlah ia sebagai amalan saleh yang diterima serta tanda kesyukuran terhadap nikmat-Mu yang tidak terhingga serta rahmat-Mu yang tiada sempadan. Ya Allah, berikanlah kami kekuatan dalam memperkukuhkan rangka kerja akademik, khususnya penyelidikan yang telah, sedang dan yang bakal kami depani. Berikanlah kefahaman kepada kami dalam usaha melonjakkan daya intelek dan usaha penyelidikan di institusi kami. Bismillahilladzi la yadurru ma'asmihi syai'un fil ardi wala fis sama'i wa huwas sami'un alim. Allahumma inna na'udzu bika minal baras wal junun wal juzam wa min sayyi'il asqam. Allahumma ij'al jam'ana hadza jam'an marhuma wa tafarruqana min ba'dihi tafarruqan ma'suma wa la taj'al fina shaqiyyan wa la mahruma. Allahumma taqabbal minna wa ahsin 'aqibatana fil umuri kulliha. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanatan wa qina 'adzaban nar. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Amin amin ya rabbal alamin. Jazakallah khair, and thank you to Brother Johari for the dua recitation. So before we go further ahead, let me introduce myself again. My name is Izzat Sufyan, academic at Gulaf Pharmacy, National Islamic University Malaysia, Kuantan campus. I'll be your host and moderator for today's event. So before we go for discussion with our speaker, let me introduce a bit about himself. So Alexander is currently a senior consultant in research intelligence at Elsevier, where he currently serves institution in South Asia region. He has over 10 years experience in research analytics and has worked closely with local citation indexes and journal editors in helping them in their journey to indexing in Scopus. So Alexander basically from the Netherlands, he's a Dutch, but currently he's living in Singapore since 2013. He also holds a master's degree in developmental psychology from University of Amsterdam. So without further ado, I would like to invite our speaker today, Alexander. Please welcome to our virtual floor.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Izzat.
Hi, Alex.
For the,
good morning.
For the
so how are you?
Introduction. I'm good. Yeah,
So how's weather in Singapore? Is it bright?
It's hot as usual. It's a little bit cloudy. Just like Malaysia, we're spending most of our time inside. So I'm here behind the computer most of my time.
Yeah, I think even same here. We are experiencing lockdown. I think the second week of lockdown. I mean, the third circle of lockdown happening in Malaysia right now. So is it in Singapore also a lockdown, or how is it? I know they call it circuit breaker, right, in Singapore?
Yeah, they call it a circuit breaker. We had very good times for about 8 months, but for the last 3 weeks, we've gone back into a lockdown because COVID made its way back into Singapore and spread quite quickly, unfortunately. So.
Oh yeah, actually that's quite unfortunate. It's happening also in Malaysia, like a bit worrying. We're still hitting more than 5,000 cases per day at present. So I think both of our countries are actually fighting for this.
I think the whole world is fighting for it, to be honest.
That's true. The whole world, not just us.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think I will not take much of your time, so I will give the whole floor to you to present your topic today, please.
Okay, thank you. So again, thank you for the introduction, and a big thank you to IIUM for organizing this this talk on a topic that's become a hot topic not only in Malaysia but as mentioned throughout the world. Predatory publishing. What is it? Why should researchers be careful with regard to this? And why is it a problem that we all together need to kind of look at how we can navigate this? So today I want to shed light a little bit on that. I'm going to try and seamlessly share my screen with you if you give me one moment. Okay, there we go. So you should be able to see my slides now. And I'm going to present for about 45 minutes to 1 hour. And I'll try to go slow. I'll try to cover this quite comprehensively. And at the end, we'll have time for questions. And I'll do my best to answer everything. And I'll start at the beginning. So the agenda is looking at what is predatory publishing. So when we talk about predatory publishing, a lot of people are not sure what exactly it is. And if we're going to have a meaningful discussion, it's important that we're all kind of on the same page about what it is. Why do researchers need to be vigilant? So why do you need to be a little bit careful these days with regard to which journal you would target for publishing your manuscript in? We look a little bit at what Scopus does to ensure the quality of the journals that are in Scopus. And lastly, we look at some general advice and recommendations for researchers, what we think can help in terms of mindset, and some tools on how to avoid falling into the trap. Lastly, I'll also show you how to identify which journals are in Scopus and clearly understand which ones of them are active and which ones of them have been discontinued. So firstly, what is predatory publishing? There have been a number of studies that have looked at predatory publishing, and they all kind of agree, and we can see that also just within our own research ecosystem here in Southeast Asia or Malaysia, that predatory journals are on the rise. So there have been more journals which show predatory behavior in targeting researchers for the wrong reasons, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So a study has shown that there were probably around 53,000 papers published in predatory journals in 2010. And now it's been more recently at about 420,000. So the number of predatory journals and how many people are publishing in them, how many papers are being published has risen. And about 75% of the authors who publish in predatory journals are from Asia or Africa. So that's an interesting statistic. So there are relatively more people participating in this, maybe on accident, from Africa and Asia. And also it generates quite a lot of money. So the reason for predatory publishing is that it is a way for what I would say are bad actors to use the context of science to make money. And that has been called predatory publishing because these journals, they prey on the researcher's need to publish, right? So that term was first used by Dr. Jeffrey Beall in 2010, who became the unofficial watchdog for predatory publishing. And he created a website and a list in which he listed journals which he believed are predatory, and that list became called Beall's list. And many people refer to this list today. That list was a good initiative of Jeffrey Beall, but it had its weaknesses in terms of the method that he used to determine whether a journal is predatory or not. So Jeffrey Beall's method was based purely on the publisher, and he did not provide a holistic or detailed account of why he believes that a particular journal is predatory. Therefore, it's not a method that you can replicate. And he received quite a bit of criticism for that method, and that's what led to that Beall's list being closed at the beginning of 2017. So it's good to understand that Beall's list is currently not active. Why has predatory publishing become more of a problem, or has it become more active today than, let's say, 10 years ago? The first and foremost, as researchers, there is a need to publish. Publish or perish, they call it, but career progression depends on publishing research papers. There may be quotas or KPOs in place to become a PhD, to become a postdoc, and so forth. So that's easy to understand factor. Secondly, technology. These days, it's pretty easy to set up a website. So if you think that a bad actor, so if a group of people who thought, well, we want to make money, and we want to use journal publishing as a context to try and make money, but we're not going to run our journal responsibly. We're not really going to do peer review. We're just going to accept papers from anyone who pays us the fee, right? That's kind of what predatory publishing is doing. And that's become much easier because of technology, where it's easy to set up a website, it's easy to email people and get in contact with large volumes of researchers. It's easy to receive electronic payments and so forth. So it's simply become easier today than it was in the past. Inexperience in the online environment. So there some people are not really good at being able to distinguish a genuine journal from a fake journal, for example. So if you were to find two websites for the same journal, how do you understand which one is the real journal and which one is the fake journal? There's not everyone is equally experienced or able to do that, and that's something we'll talk about today as well. The open access model, I don't know if you all know what open access is, but if we look at the history of publishing, for many years it has been libraries who pay to get access to journals. So it has always been free for the researcher to publish, and in essence, it's the reader or the university which pays for access to the content. That's the traditional publishing model. But in the last 15 years, we've seen a model evolve quite quickly, which is called open access. And open access means that the researcher pays a fee, and that means that when that paper is published, everyone in the world with internet can read it. So it's open to everyone. So the reader doesn't need to pay. So in essence, it's the researcher or the research institution which pays, and there are benefits to that. So open access is very popular. Open access does not mean that when you pay, you're guaranteed to be accepted to the journal. So the way that open access works is, if your paper is accepted by the journal, if the paper makes it through the peer review, then you would pay a fee for it to be published, right? But what predatory journals are doing is kind of abusing this, because now people are used to that they have to pay, or that it is one of the methods, right, is to pay a fee. And because of that, people don't really raise an eyebrow if a journal is saying, well, it costs $500 to publish with us. Oh, it must just be an open access journal. Maybe that's a positive thing. So the fact that open access exists and that it has become a kind of normal practice to publish, to pay article processing fee, is also one of the factors. Only recently has there been a consensus definition of what predatory journals are. And I think, as I mentioned to you, not everyone has been clear on what it is. And in my view, it's really people with the wrong intention. So the consensus definition that's been come up with by a group of researchers is: predatory journals and publishers are entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship and are characterized by false or misleading information, deviation from best editorial and publication practices, a lack of transparency, and or the use of aggressive and indiscriminate solicitation practices. So a very important part of the statement is entities that prioritize self-interest at the expense of scholarship. So I think there should be no mistake that predatory journals are bad actors. They're people with the intention to make money, and likely do not have any intention of furthering scientific bodies of knowledge. So they are using this context to make money for themselves, and often much of the information that they provide is simply false or not true. Often they are tricking you into publishing with them. So it's kind of like a scam. I remember quite a while ago, people used to get emails from a Nigerian prince who promised that there was a lot of money ready for you if only you were to send a small fee to facilitate the banking transfer, right? These are scams. People are tricking you. I think that's an important thing to understand, is very much about the intention of the journal and the people that run the journal. And there are many reasons why researchers need to be vigilant about this practice. Unfortunately, it means that you as a researcher, we have to be a little bit careful, you know? Now, why selecting the right journal is important is because there are consequences for choosing a bad journal. So if you accidentally publish in a predatory journal, there's a monetary cost because it costs money for you or for the institution for the article processing fee. And when people find out that the journal is predatory, probably that paper that you publish might no longer count towards your profile, or it might no longer count towards your institutional KPO. Secondly, there are reputational costs. If you publish quite a lot in predatory journals, and people see this, whether it's a funding body or it's a different university, you apply maybe to move to a different university, and they look at your history and they see, oh, but this person has published quite a lot in predatory journals, then this may not be what they're looking for. So there's an element of reputation that you need to be a little bit careful about. Also, there's a negative impact on rankings and research assessments because predatory journals may be removed from indexes. It might be removed from a rankings exercise. Who knows? Maybe from Myra, they won't count it anymore. So it has a negative impact on all kinds of evaluations and assessments. Durability. If you publish a paper in a predatory journal, there's no guarantee that that paper will continue to exist. Maybe it will be, that journal will cease to exist, and maybe it will be on a blacklist and nobody will want to look at it, and so forth. It might be delisted by one of the indexing services, whether it's Scopus or a different indexing service. We might remove the journal if it turns out to be predatory. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that, so don't worry if you're unclear on the details. And there are even possible legal consequences of publishing in such journals. Now, what I want to do is run you through different types of behavior that we see in predatory journals that you should be aware of, I think, as a researcher, but also librarians, policymakers, government bodies, Elsevier, every other publisher. We need to be aware of these different types of behavior that we see around predatory publishing. So I'm going to start with journal hijacking. So journal hijacking is basically when there is a legitimate journal and that journal's website gets hacked and or stolen by a different party. So it could be that a journal is real and it's a good journal and it's in Scopus, but some, as I call them, bad actors, they create another website which uses the same name and the same ISSN and basically copies all of the information and tricks researchers into publishing into the hijacked or cloned version. That way they benefit from the brand of the real journal. But if you publish in the wrong journal, it's a problem, right? In some cases, these journal hijackers have been so clever that they even tricked Scopus, so that they tricked Scopus asking us, can we send you our new data? And they even got their the data from their kind of fake journal indexed into Scopus, because what we saw was all of the same information of the journal that we had accepted, except that these were not the right people. They were pretending to be the other people. And I'll show you some examples. So if you have the Transylvanian Review is a journal, and then you see a second website for Transylvanian Review. So which one is real? Which one should I consider to submit my article to? I think you really have to do your homework to figure out one of them is a clone, one of them is not real. So if we look at this other journal, we see that this journal has a website and is welcoming authors to submit papers. But then actually we found out that this journal ceased to exist in 2017. So a journal which is no longer active today, people have created a fake website and they use the name and the ISSN and the brand, the reputation of that journal to attract articles in return for a cost, of course. Another example, which I saw that quite a few researchers in Malaysia had published in this journal called Solid State Technology, which actually stopped publishing in 2019. So we can see that their last issue was January, February 2019. But if you look today, there is a new website called Solid State Technology. And look, it's got a big sticker here that says that we are indexed in Scopus and we have a site score of 0.3 and they're welcoming manuscripts. And this is a fake journal. This is cloned. They have stolen the identity of the original Solid State Technology and are asking authors to pay money to publish there. So you need to be really careful about this. Obviously, we are very active at monitoring this and making sure that this type of content, fake content, does not make its way into Scopus, but we cannot do it alone. So you cannot rely only on Scopus or any other database to do this on time and 100% accuracy. So as a researcher, it's good to be aware and just be careful. Secondly, paper brokers. These are kind of like a third party. They would be a company or a person which goes to a university, approaches a university, whether it's a library or a research office, or to the researchers directly, and offers them a service where they say, well, if you pay us a certain amount of money, we guarantee that your manuscript will be published in a journal that's in Scopus. And there are a number of them around the world, and I'll show you one example. And I know that they're active in Malaysia. I've spoken to a number of universities who've said that they get approached by paper brokers all the time, and that it's a tempting proposition because there's simply pressure to publish. So it seems like a nice thing to have that guarantee of being published in Scopus journals. But I think it's very important to understand that all the journals that are in Scopus select their papers based on a peer review. It should be very difficult to get accepted into a journal that's indexed in Scopus, and no guarantees can ever be made that you will be accepted. So anyone who's approaching you and saying, we guarantee that your publication will be published in, that your manuscript will be published in a Scopus indexed journal, they simply cannot make that promise. And again, they're looking for money, an upfront payment, right? So an example is IJRDO. Here they say IJRDO journal provides a wide range of journals. Here they say submit your article for a Scopus journal at scopus@ephjournal.org. They mention a number of journals here, and they implicitly make it seem like you would be guaranteed to be published in one of these journals. They also kind of make it seem like they work together with us by using the name Scopus. We have nothing to do with them, and they're making promises that they cannot make, right? Again, every journal that's in Scopus does a peer review, and only the quality of the manuscript is the only factor with regard to acceptance or rejection. If we were to find out that a journal is not properly doing peer review, then they will be removed from Scopus. So you shouldn't, either way, you shouldn't publish there. You should not consider it. It's really bad news. So you have to recognize these people who approach you and are making a proposition which seems too good to be true. Probably is too good to be true, and it's probably illegal, and it's not the way to go. Thirdly, language plagiarism. This is something that came up in Russia, but it's good to be aware of. Sometimes an article which was published in a local language. So, for example, let's say you publish a paper in Bahasa in a local journal. Some other journals might publish the same paper translated into a different language. So they might translate it into English or into Russian and publish it. And this is very difficult to detect because all of the tools like Authenticate and different plagiarism tools cannot account for the difference in language. They don't notice that it's the same paper. This is the responsibility of the author. So plagiarism is the responsibility of the author. So whoever has taken the paper and translated it and submitted it to the journal as if it was a original article, they're the ones that have the bad intent. So it's not necessarily the journal, but if a journal is doing this on a structural basis, so if it's not like one-off, but they're doing it very often, then as Scopus, we might need to remove that journal from Scopus because it might be either a blind spot, so a lack of quality in their process, or it could be a bad intention. Citation manipulation. This is when people or groups of people try to boost the citations of a journal by giving citations not based on an academic need to cite or reference knowledge that was used in your paper, but only because they want to boost the performance of the journal. So that's something that can be tracked pretty easily. Citation cartels and citation manipulation these days with AI and big data analysis is pretty easy to detect that, and we do detect that. And all the journals which we think benefit from citations that they should not have received will be flagged for reevaluation. But it's good to understand that does happen, and actually you should be able to see it in Scopus. So what does Scopus do to curate its content? And before I go into this, I understand maybe not everyone is as familiar with Scopus as I am, and we'll take a minute to look at what is it about, what does Scopus do, and why is it important, or what's the synergy between Scopus and researchers? Is that research institutions aspire to improve visibility and research excellence. Researchers need to do research and find literature and different data to make different decisions. For example, what journal shall I publish? And Scopus provides data to institutions to facilitate, hopefully, wise decisions to be made with confidence. And I won't go through each of these elements, but a very important part of what Scopus provides is a trusted source of dissemination. So it's incredibly important that we keep the journals that are in Scopus to be the highest quality, right? And to keep journals at the highest quality, we have to select journals very selectively as well as curate them. For those of you who are new to Scopus, it is a source-neutral abstract and citation database. So it includes peer-reviewed journals, conference proceedings, books, and book series from 7,000 publishers. And by now, it's over 80 million records or items in Scopus. And every researcher has an author profile, and every institution has an affiliation profile. And that means that it can be used to track the performance of a researcher, right? So the government, it could be MOE, or it could be the research office at IIUM or a different university wants to understand who are the strong performing researchers, and maybe they will use a metric like H-index. And I'll just show you very quickly. I've been if we look here in Scopus, right? So all of you in Malaysia, all the 20 public universities have access to Scopus. So you should all be able to access Scopus at www.scopus.com. And one of the many things you can do is search for authors. So if I search for my professor at the University of Amsterdam, so I find here Richard Riderinkhoff, and if I click on his name, I get an author profile. And in this profile, I see a lot of information about Richard Riderinkhoff. I see that he's affiliated to the University of Amsterdam, and you can see that he's been there for a while, but he also works with a number of other units. Oops, that was accident. But here you can also see that he has a H index of 64. And H index is the number of papers which have the same number of citations or more. So if your H index in this case is 64, it means that Richard Riderinkhoff has 64 papers which are cited at least 64 times. So if we see here are his documents, right? His most highly cited paper was cited 2,049 times. And if we scroll down, we see actually that's where the number of documents his 64th paper was cited 64 times. And that means his H index is 64. H index is very often used to quickly look and understand the performance of a researcher because it's a combination of output as well as citations, which is kind of a proxy for quality. So you capture both volume of research as well as quality in one metric. And anyone with an H index of 64 is probably a quite senior and successful researcher. This is based only on the papers which Richard Riderinkhoff has published in journals which are included in Scopus. And I will show you a little bit later how you can see which journals are included in Scopus. So don't worry about it if you don't know already. So Scopus selects journals for inclusion in the database. And our mandate is really at a journal level. So we select individual journals. A journal can submit itself. So if, for example, IIUM has a journal, and they say we want to be in Scopus, they can submit themselves to Scopus. They will be evaluated at a journal level. Of course, they will look at the underlying papers and they will look at many factors. But ultimately, once that journal gets accepted into Scopus, we don't look day to day at the papers that they're publishing, right? So once it's in Scopus, we do it on the basis that the editorial team should be strong and responsible. And we're not looking day to day at the individual papers. But if we think that malpractice is happening, for example, we see that there are many papers being published which are fraudulent or there's some kind of a problem, then we can reevaluate that journal. But we do that holistically. So we are evaluating at the journal level. We're not looking at every single paper that gets loaded into Scopus. All those journals are evaluated by an independent content selection advisory board, which we call the CSAB. There are these 17 people in this photograph. Each one is a subject chair, a prominent researcher in each one of them a different field, and they own the responsibility of deciding whether a journal gets accepted into Scopus or rejected. They are independent in the sense that they are not employees of Elsevier or Scopus. We collaborate with them. They have a mandate to be objective. We cannot influence them. Journals can also be discontinued from Scopus. So we don't only accept new journals into Scopus, but sometimes we have to discontinue journals. And that's a rigorous process based on quantitative and qualitative criteria. We do not, so Scopus does not index predatory journals, but what we do see is that a journal, the performance and behavior of a journal can change over time. So most journals, once they get indexed into Scopus, their performance improves, they thrive, they do much better. But some small percentage of journals that get accepted into Scopus, their performance might go down, or they might become predatory. So maybe a journal gets purchased by a publisher which is into predatory practices, or gets purchased or taken over by a group of people that wants to use that journal for the wrong thing. And that's what makes this kind of tricky territory. We do our best to make sure that none of the journals in Scopus are predatory. But again, a journal might be a perfectly good journal at the moment that we accept it into Scopus. Some of them, and it really is not a huge number, may adopt some funny practices. And what we do is we monitor the behavior of the journals and we flag them. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but these are the criteria by which we select and reevaluate journals in Scopus. And we curate all of the journals that are in Scopus by monitoring different aspects, which I'll mention in a moment. And then we take what we think needs to be a very well-informed decision whether a journal needs to be removed from Scopus, because we can't just remove a journal because someone says, I think it's predatory, right? So if someone says, I think it's a predatory journal, we need to do a very holistic and careful analysis by the CSAB. So it's not me or anyone at Elsevier, but it's the Content Selection Advisory Board. And they don't take removing a journal lightly, because they don't want to accidentally remove legitimate journals from Scopus just because there's concern, right? So the method that we have in place is that all the journals that are in Scopus are constantly being scanned and flagged for reevaluation based on 4 aspects. The first one is what we call publication concerns. So if for example, a journal is on a blacklist, if Malaysia made a blacklist and we see that one of the journals on the blacklist is in Scopus, we will have reason to reevaluate the journal. Or if Dr. Izat calls me and says, hey, Sander, I think that there's this journal and it's been approaching our researchers and it's charging a lot of money, but we think that they're not really doing a peer review. Everything's being accepted. I would bring that to the Scopus team, and it would go into the reevaluation process. Secondly, there's underperformance. So this is slightly different. A journal can underperform without being predatory. So basically, it means that maybe they just don't receive many citations and they're just not very impactful anymore. They could be really genuine journal with the best of intentions, but some journals just over time don't perform well, and we also flag those based on self-citations and citation analysis. Thirdly, we look at strange behaviors in performance. We use a machine learning tool which we call Radar, and we look at outlier performance. For example, if a journal one year publishes 40 papers and the next year publishes 800 papers, or if the entire editorial board of a journal changes overnight, or if the subject area that the journal is publishing in changes completely over the period of a year, then that would be behavior that would probably be appropriate to reevaluate that journal and have a closer look at what's going on. Fourth, journals which are newly accepted into Scopus, within the first 2 years will be reevaluated, because we see quite a lot of new journals, they get into Scopus and then they change their behavior once they get into Scopus. So 2 years after acceptance, they will be evaluated a second time to see if they should stay in Scopus. So the way that process works is you have all those journals that are in Scopus. We continually monitor on an ongoing basis based on those 4 aspects that I just mentioned. and we flag the journals which we think there's a good reason to have a closer look. At this point, we don't know for sure there's any problem. We're just saying these are journals that we think we need to have a closer look, and that goes to the CSAB, and one by one they look and evaluate that journal holistically, but also understanding what the concerns were. That exercise has resulted since 2016, we've reevaluated roughly 1,000 journals, and these are those four categories which we mentioned, where the one related to publication concerns is most closely related to predatory publishing, right? So predatory journals would be a subset of these journals here. These 434 journals include all the journals in Beale's list and journals in various blacklists and old journals where partners, whether it's governments or universities, have said to us that we think there's a reason to suspect that journal. All of those have gone into the reevaluation process, and we've discontinued 67% of them. That's not 100%. So it shows that while we did discontinue more than half, that there is a certain percentage of those journals where the CSAB, taking a holistic view of the journal, came to a different conclusion than Jeffrey Beale, or a different conclusion than someone who has published a blacklist. And that is, again, part of what makes this complex, is that two different people or two different organizations might have a different view of which journals are predatory. But as I've showed you, our method is quite holistic and detailed. So we're really looking at many aspects of the journal. And if there is no evidence of predatory behavior, we can, and they have good quality content, and they have a respectable editorial board, and the papers that they're publishing are good quality, then we don't see a reason to remove them. So this is a quote from one of the CSAB members. He's actually the chair of the CSAB currently, Dr. Georg Rüdinger. Whether or not a journal is predatory is not a binary decision. There's a broad spectrum of predatory journal behaviors. To assess whether a journal should be considered predatory, a number of parameters need to be considered, often in combination. So as mentioned myself, it's just not it's not quite as black and white or as easy as we want it to be. What happens when a journal is discontinued from Scopus? In the vast majority of cases, we keep the older content in Scopus, and we stop indexing the new content. So if a journal was discontinued in December 2020, we would leave the older content in Scopus, but from January 2021, we would stop indexing new content. The reason for that is that when the journal was accepted into Scopus, it met our criteria. And if it changed its behavior and became predatory, we need to detect the point at which that happens and stop indexing the future content. But in most cases, we leave the older content in Scopus. In some exceptional cases where there's really severe unethical publication practices, we can and very sometimes do remove papers that are indexed in Scopus. So that's only in exceptional cases, because we don't want to remove good content from Scopus. We don't want to remove articles from people's author profiles or from the institutional profile of IIUM, for example. It's good for stability to keep the older content in. But if it's proven that that content is fraudulent, for example, we have to remove it, and we can do that. There is a list which you can download via this link here at the bottom, but you can also download it from within Scopus itself. And that is the authoritative place to understand which journals are active in Scopus and which are not. And it includes a discontinued sources list where you can see exactly which journals have been discontinued from Scopus. I'm going to have a quick drink. I'm getting a dry throat from talking so much. Within Scopus, when you look at the page for a given journal, so here we're looking at the International Journal of Civil Engineering and Technology, we can see that it's discontinued in Scopus, but Scopus still has the 2016 to 2019 content that's been indexed. So we kept that in the database. It is clearly important to remove journals that are predatory or adopt poor publishing practices from the Scopus database. It is less clear what to do with the earlier content in the database, particularly as it may have arisen in periods when the journal was well managed and represents output from well-conducted research. So this is from Peter Brimblecombe, who's the subject chair for environmental science of the CSAB, pointing out that in many cases it makes sense to keep the older content in Scopus, but in some cases we can remove them. So I know that makes it a little bit tricky. Another question we receive quite often is, how does Scopus compare to Web of Science? So Web of Science is another abstract and citation database from a different company. How do we compare, and does predatory publishing, is it a Scopus problem, or does it also affect other databases? So to understand that, we need to look at the differences in coverage. Scopus is one database, so everyone who uses Scopus has access to the same content. Web of Science has different, I think, collections, they call them. And if you look at the three main collections of Web of Science, those are the ones that use the journal impact factor. Scopus covers 99% of the journals which are in those three main databases. And the, let's say, less than 1% that we don't cover, we chose not to cover in terms of the evaluation. The Web of Science Emerging Science Citation Index, there we cover only about 60% of the journals, where we have evaluated a lot of the other content and we've rejected quite a lot of that because it didn't meet the quality criteria. But beyond that, our coverage is broader. So if you take all the content that's in those four databases, Scopus has a lot of additional journals that are not in Web of Science. Is predatory publishing an issue for other databases? And simply put, it is. It very much is a problem for everyone. And if you look at Web of Science, they also continue to index the older content of journals which they've removed. If you remember, I mentioned that we have reevaluated 1,000 journals. We've discontinued 580 journals from Scopus. But of the 580 journals that we discontinued from Scopus, 146 of those are still indexed in Web of Science. So it's very interesting, right? Sometimes people say, hey, there's this journal that Web of Science has discontinued. Did you discontinue it as well? And in some cases, Scopus has not discontinued a journal that Web of Science has discontinued. And sometimes Web of Science has not discontinued a journal that Scopus has discontinued. And it shows that there is sometimes not perfect agreement between different parties on what is the authoritative, white list for good journals. So if you ask 3 different organizations for a white list or a black list, you get 3 different lists. And that's why it's very, 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 very important that researchers be able to make their own decisions and not only rely on a list that's provided by others. So what we really recommend is that as researchers, you become vigilant and just look out, look out for the signs of predatory publishing. Part of that could be the website. So if we look at phony versus legit websites, some of the phony websites kind of look amateurish. They might have some fake information. They might have grammatical mistakes. They might have they might overly prominently show where you can pay the bill and so forth. I think it's easier to look at it in a table view where I think the false journals often not always. They look unprofessional. They often boast that they're indexed in Scopus or in Web of Science, right? So they're very much showing you, publish with us and we're indexed in Scopus or we're indexed in Web of Science. Generally, they're over eager. So they are so willing, so trying to convince you, publish with us. If you pay this much, you can publish with us. Often there's a lack of transparency. There's not much information about the peer review or how they make their decisions. There's not much information about who to contact. Maybe it's not a proper email address. It's just like a Gmail. They're very focused on the money. Maybe the subject area that they cover doesn't match your manuscript, but still they seem very eager to publish your manuscript. So it's that aggressive solicitation and repeated emails and being very flattering and just being too eager to publish your work. Keep in mind that a journal should be quite difficult to publish in. They're very selective. A good journal is just simply not easy to get in, and that's part of kind of what it is to become a researcher, is to learn to produce manuscripts and research that is of the quality that it can be accepted by a genuine journal, which is very selective. So don't fall into the trap of trying to falling for the trick of a journal that is just so eager to publish your work and isn't critically evaluating your manuscript, which is what that's kind of how the scientific endeavor and peer review system works. So you need to do your due diligence. Unfortunately, we do what we do. Scopus will do its very best to curate and remove any journals that develop problematic behavior. But still, it makes sense for researchers to use tools like Think, Check, and Submit, which is an initiative by a number of parties. Is pick a journal not because they're eager to publish you, but does the topic match your manuscript's topic? Does it match the journal scope? Is it the right type of document, right? So is it an original research article? Is it a review? And so forth. So you can actually go here to checksubmit.org, and it will help you to go through a process of thinking about that. I mentioned also that within Scopus, you can download the source title list here. So you can always see which journals are active and discontinued in Scopus. I already showed you this, so I'm just going to skip it. But again, check in Scopus, get your hands on the latest edition of this list. It's updated once a month. But also, just think about when you're targeting a journal and you're thinking about it. If you don't know what's a good journal for your manuscript, you might want to talk to your colleagues, talk to your peers, ask for recommendations. You might want to speak to your supervisor, a mentor. You might want to look at authors that you read, right? What journals are they publishing in, or what are the journals that you find in the references of papers that you are reading? You can look at articles where you've been cited, what journals were they published, and so forth. So there's a lot of, asking peers, asking mentors, and looking in the data at the papers that you read and the papers that cite you, the papers that are referenced in journals that you're reading. Those might be a good way to shortlist journals that fit your topic really well. Yeah, so what is your manuscript format, right? So a good journal will always have very detailed requirements for authors. They might have a particular requirement regarding format, and a good journal also has a very clear delineation of what field or what topics that they're publishing in. So you need to look at, does your manuscript match what they're looking for? Also, are you required to publish in an open access journal or not? Some researchers are receiving funding that requires them to publish in an open access journal. So if you have that requirement, then you would need to shortlist which ones are open access. and so forth. You could think about, do you want to publish with a particular publisher like Elsevier or Springer or so forth? So you might go to the website of the publisher and look at which journals that they have there. So here are the 7 key questions. Is your manuscript the right fit for the journal? Do you have funder institutional mandates that you need to require? Is there a reasonable chance of acceptance? I like that. So I know that you don't want to aim so high that you have no chance, but at the same time, you don't want to aim so low that you might be publishing in a journal that's a fake journal, right? You think you want to set your target to the right level, but also challenge yourself, right? Just because someone is saying we will publish it with a guarantee doesn't mean it's a good idea. Is the journal indexed in the relevant databases? So if you have a requirement that you publish in a journal that's in Scopus, you would need to check that, so forth. But it just means you have to be a little bit of a detective. And I know that might not be the answer that everybody wants to hear, but it's a reality. It's simply being online these days is a little bit like being in the city. You know, when you're in the city, you know, you need to watch out a little bit for people who are approaching you and saying certain things. They might not be telling the truth. So you need to recognize the signs, do your due diligence, collaborate with your library, with your mentors, and so forth. Reach out to Scopus if you have questions for us. You can always reach out to us as well. I've provided some other resources here that we'll disseminate the PDF of, so you can do a bit of reading if this interests you. That's pretty much the end of my presentation. I've also included a link here to a survey to rate my performance and rate this event. So I don't know how you will be able to click on it unless we send you the PDF. But if you do this survey, you can also get a certificate of attendance of this event. So to do that, you just need to go here and answer a couple questions. It should be pretty simple. And with that, I thank you for listening. I've talked for a full hour. I'm gonna try and revert back to Dr. Izet. So.
Hi, thank you, Alexander, for the presentation. I mean, like, there's a lot of, inputs that have been explained to you, especially about predatory journals, and then how exactly Elsevier, Scopus look into of categorizing them. We have got quite, look into the questions and comments on the YouTube chat box. We have quite a number of questions, suggestions also from the participants for today. So maybe we can go with our first question then. Would that be okay with you, Alex?
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll do my best.
Okay, I think perhaps just question from myself before we go for the comment, because I'm also like part of research. I'm really like into quite worried about all this publication. With a lot of invitation. We know that it's a very legit and non-legit invitation that you receive from many journals available. So as I think one of the slides that you mentioned right now, like they're quite a duplicate website that kind of like looks legit, but then it's not. So like for those who not really kind of like into computer or not the IT stuff, like how exactly you know that this journal is exactly from a legit website, or is actually like copy paste or like duplicate of a similar journals, but actually it's a trap or predatory?
Yeah, I think yes. So sometimes that happens, and if your question is what do you do as a researcher, I think that it can make sense to search for the name of the journal in Google. And if you see that there are 2 different websites, then you know that's a hint already that one of them isn't the real one, right? So then probably check the people that are approaching you, or if you're already in contact with the journal, you need to see which one that they're connected to. I think there are other telltale signs, right? So I don't think it's only the website that will answer all the questions, but it's also the communication, the promises that they're making. Does the website, have a big Scopus banner, and is it really trying to lure you? Does it have some of those signs that you would say, hey, this might not be a journal which is really selecting manuscripts based on quality, but they seem very eager. Yeah, so I think that those factors altogether would be a warning sign. And then again, you've got people, you have peers, you have mentors. You can write to your library, or the library can write to us. We're always happy to look from our side and tell a library whether we think that there's any issue with a particular journal. So, for example, I got an email last year that was like, "Hey, the Journal of Solid State Technology, do you know any issue with this?" And then I talked to the Scopus team. They said, yes, it got cloned, it's hijacked. Actually, it stopped publishing in 2019. So anyone that's being invited to publish there is going into a fake one, right?
Okay. I mean, yeah, I think like first of all, like your intuition, you feel like something's wrong. Like it's better maybe contact the library or get directly to SVO or WS or any major one just to confirm whether this is exactly a legit, or as you mentioned, being hijacked by predatory party and so on. So there's a question from Leo Chi Sang. So he asking like if there any website for us to check the genuine one, because like like for plagiarism, we can use Turnitin just to check. And is there something similar software or website or any platform that, I mean, on top of contacting directly to particular journals, then like particular software or platform that we can use to check whether this is legit or not?
No, I mean, I wish it was so simple. We very much want Scopus to be the authoritative source, right? So ideally, I would say that every single journal that's in Scopus, 100% sure, there's no problem with it. And the problem with that is, as I mentioned, the journals may be completely genuine, good quality science at the moment that they're accepted, and they might change their behavior. And it's a small percentage of the journals. It just means that if you use Scopus as the list, to decide which journal you want to submit to, you still need to do a little bit of due diligence. So if you see any of those warning signs, you need to think, hey, is this the right thing? And maybe it's a legitimate journal that's indexed in Scopus, and you're being approached by a clone. So even then, even if you have a journal name that's on a whitelist somewhere, it's still not 100% guaranteed. So we kind of think you got to recognize the signs and think twice. Just think twice about, is what I see here look good? Does it look professional? Does it look like they're really selecting my manuscript based on quality? Or are there signs that, I don't know, something about their eagerness or lack of information and so forth?
Yeah, I think I do agree with that. Like, I mean, I wish there's a very a clear, simple platform to check. But then, yeah, as you said, it comes to the researcher as well. Like, need to check that really, if you see something's wrong with it, it's immediately just hold on and just have a proper contact communication with this proper party just to ensure that you are not trapped. I think I'm not saying most, but some of the researchers have been like kind of pressure of publication, need to publish their work and so on.
Yeah.
So like, oh, I got invitation through email, like, oh, it offers me free publication, so why not? I just go for it. But then at the end, when you realize you've been trapped into the predatory one, so yeah, that's quite unfortunate event. But then that's quite common cases happen. I assume that you've seen this quite numbers, right? People got trapped into this like invitation and so on, right?
Yeah. Most people, they get fooled and they don't do it on purpose. So again, it's called predatory because the people that do this are preying on researchers to make money. I think there's also a sense of maybe it seems easy.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that it's like, oh, this is easier than me publishing aiming higher and saying I'm going to publish in a journal that I know 100% sure is legit, right? But my chances of being accepted are not 100%. Or I can publish in this journal here, which it seems like my chances are like 99%. And then maybe they ignore the warning signs, but maybe they just don't know to look for the warning signs, right? They don't know that this is going on, only hear about it after the fact that, hey, this journal ended up not being what I thought it was. So that's why I think it's an awareness thing, and the world has changed very quickly. We know that from COVID that things move quickly. The world can be different in a short time. And with regard to predatory publishing, I think technology and everything just made it pretty easy to build a website and to say, hey, I'm this legitimate journal. Come
Yeah.
work with 100. If you work with us, we'll get you sorted. But it's also in a lot of cases, after the fact, in retrospect, you look at it, you say, oh, it could have been clear. I mean, maybe the subject area that they're in, it's like really broad. We publish everything, or you could see that they say that they're active in a particular area, but then they want to publish your manuscript, but your manuscript is not anything closely related to those topics. So then,
Yeah.
But
there's some like a website. What the question is, the purpose, right? But then there's certain website also is predatory, but they're not even asking any money from the author or the researchers. So why? I do understand that they offer you money, like confirmation of you being published, but of course they're targeting the money, right? The monetary purposes. But then those that predatory, not even asking money from the author or researchers, but they say, okay, you can be published because it's like free, it's open access, and also free, you can publish for free. And actually it's not legit, it's a non-legit publisher or journal. So why do these kind of things? Are they actually trying to take the data, or what do you think on your side?
That's a really good question. I've not come across any predatory journals that were not taking an article processing fee. So the ones that I've come across have all been taking the money up front. If you're aware of ones that are predatory and it's free to publish in them, I don't know. Let me know. Maybe we can discuss it, look at it later.
Yeah.
I don't know how they would. Yeah, what's the interest in doing that? I'm not quite sure.
Okay, and then you did mention in your presentation just now, like some of projects managed to slip into Scopus. So is it that because they're starting become non-predatory, and somehow when they got the names, they become predatory? So
I think there's two things. So one of them would be the journal was a legitimate journal when it was accepted, and maybe it changes publisher, so the people that manage it become a different group, and that journal, which was legitimate, then adopts questionable practices, right? So that's one scenario, and we need to detect the change in behavior and then de-index them. The second one could be it's a legitimate journal that's in Scopus that gets hijacked by people that use the name. So, for example, solid state technology, the journal stops publishing in 2019, and a different group build a website and they collect content, and they contact Scopus and they say, actually, we're active. Can we send you our new content? Now, if they're very convincing, Scopus in some cases has been tricked and accidentally, indexes information from a new party who's pretending to be a journal that was previously indexed. So there would not be, the journal didn't get taken over by a new party, but it's like a new party fakes it so well that not only the authors, but even Scopus, for a little while anyway, believes that they are the legitimate journal and accepts the content and uploads it into Scopus until the point that obviously it's detected, and then the whole party stops, and we remove them from Scopus. And in that case, because it's fake content, right? It was not the legitimate journal. We would have to remove all the papers from Scopus as well.
Okay, so I want to hold to that question again. Because you said some being hijacked, right? We will continue with the question I'm going to ask after this. So for those that, legitimate journals and then be hijacked by third parties. So what will happen to all these publications? They're being published and then got hijacked. So what will happen to them? Are they going to be republished in other journals, or how is the Scopus will look into it?
If it's a, so I think there was a journal called Kansai Technology Reports, which stopped publishing some years ago, and then there was a new website that was established and collected manuscripts, but it was a predatory journal, so it's a typical hijacker clone. And those papers did make its way into Scopus. And once we discovered that, what we did is we removed all the papers that were published by the illegitimate party, but we kept the papers from the older journal, which was the the journal that was accepted into Scopus. That's one of these exceptional cases because it's actually a party pretending to be someone that they're not. We can't leave it in the database as is. We have to remove it.
Okay.
And that means that and that's very frustrating because then the authors and the institution say, hey, we paid to publish, and now it's not in Scopus, it's not indexed, it doesn't count for my KPO. We spent a lot of money, we don't get any recognition for it. That's the worst scenario for everyone.
Okay. So I mean, that's give a sign like, please be careful when we want to publish something, right? Just really check on it. Don't let the pressure of publication push you to just publish.
No, it's easy for us to say. I know that it's not so
Yeah,
easy
I think,
when you're on the side of like, hey, I have to make this much to be successful in my career. But at the end of the day, the temptation to do it, especially if the signs are there and you're thinking, well, I have to do it anyway, it might not end well because again, like you might get it might count towards the KPO, you might get recognition for a while, but you might get negative recognition in the long run.
Yeah, just kind of understand that this different pressure that might coming from the researchers as well, right? Okay, so the next question is from Suhaimi Masarif. He asked, like, is there any regulatory bodies that can prevent or helping the fake and predatory journals? I mean, like, I'm not sure about the local or maybe from the publisher side as well. Is there any regulatory bodies that look into it?
I think we all do this together. There are different parties that have made black and white lists. So sometimes it's a government body, sometimes it's an individual university, and everyone's asking like, who has the authority to do this? And I think at the end of the day, we need to do it together because, as mentioned, you ask 3 different parties to make a white list or a black list, and you get 3 completely, well, not completely different, but significantly different enough that researchers are scratching their heads and thinking, which one do I follow? So whose responsibility is it? Scopus, Elsevier, we have the responsibility to do our very best to ensure that the journals that are indexed in Scopus are legitimate, high-quality peer-reviewed journals, and to remove any journals that have problems, either quality-wise or in terms of publication ethics, right? That is our responsibility, but we've transparent to the fact that it's not 100%. We cannot guarantee it 100%. So there's that like 0.00% of the journals in Scopus that at some point might show problems, and we do remove them, right? So eventually, once they get caught, we will remove them. But there's always that amount of time between, their change in behavior and when we catch them, that it's a risk for that maybe someone publishes in them. I think it's everyone's responsibility to work on this. I don't think anyone can prevent it, not us alone, right? So I think if the researcher's behavior changes such that it becomes a more difficult business, that maybe predatory journals will decline. I think right now they're on the rise simply because there's a great market for it. Right,
Yeah,
they make money easily, and there's more of them.
Because the demand's there, right?
Yeah. So I think if we, as the target market, adjust our behavior, that we say, "Hey, I'm not going to fall for this anymore," then that could drive a meaningful change over time. I think universities and governments also own some responsibility to look at this, and we work with the universities and the governments to discuss this in a lot of detail. And we all kind of agreed that it's of course our responsibility to do our best, but also our collective responsibility to educate researchers to have this skill of critically evaluating the party that they're thinking of submitting to.
Yep, I do agree with that. Maybe rest of you like suggestions by the participants on YouTube. So Salihuddin Mustafa said that I think Scopus should remove any article which is questionable. For example, articles in the content subject that are published in non-accounting journals. I think that's what you guys been doing right now, right? Try to. I mean, of course, it's not like really a direct work that you will kind of like doing everything. So unless it got be reported by someone, then you will do the filtering as well. Will that help on your side? Is it?
Well, I think what what the gentleman is saying is Scopus should remove any articles which are questionable. We don't remove individual articles, right? So our evaluation mandate is at a journal level, and right. So we either select a journal and include all the articles, or we discontinue the journal, and then we stop indexing all their articles. And in some cases, like with fraud, we would remove everything from the journal because it turns out the journal was not what we thought it was. Maybe it was someone pretending to be someone else, and so forth, right? So we're not really doing it at an individual paper level.
Yeah. So more comments from Saluddin Mustafa. So he mentioned that Scopus allows readers to send reports related to journal listed in Scopus. For example, early signs of questionable journals or publishers that can be identified by readers, scholars, and librarians. So do you accept this kind of reports from researchers or any individual?
Could you explain in a bit more detail what the suggestion is?
I think it's more like they found it like with these particular journals or publishers, a bit like the red flag signs there, that would they allow for them to report directly to Scopus? Okay, I found it is red flags from these particular journals or publishers.
Yeah, absolutely. So as mentioned, one of the ways that we shortlist or flag journals for reevaluation is based on feedback. So anybody can give feedback, but it's preferable if it's detailed. So if you have some evidence of what the malpractice is or what the concern is based on, then that will help us to justify flagging it for reevaluation, as well as adding those details so that when the CSAB do the reevaluation, they have some context as to why people are concerned about the journal. But any of you can reach out to us and say, hey, I'm really worried about that journal. There are signs that I think it might be ethically not a sound journal for the following reasons. Then we will make sure that information is with the Scopus team. And if it's sufficient, they will flag that journal for reevaluation. You will never know which journals are flagged. We cannot share that information because some journals that are flagged, it turns out there's no problem with the journal, right? So we cannot ruin the reputation of a journal by saying these are the journals that are flagged. We will only be able to communicate it after the final evaluation is done. We will add the names of the journals that have been discontinued to the discontinued title list.
Okay. So you have like comment here. I'm not sure whether there's a big confusion. Maybe like typo or what, like from Jabbat Deltana mentioned that Scopus should allow to make this profile profit without demanding institute ID for postgraduate student. I think perhaps like access for students without demanding through institution access. I think that might this particular person asking or suggestions for to Scopus.
I'm not sure what the question is.
Yeah, I'd be confused. I think like a lot of like access. Like if you through the organization, you have like free access. If that particular institute have that particular subscription, like maybe mention that if for student purpose that they can have access without through the institution, perhaps. Like so they can have access to that journals without through the subscription.
Yeah, I think access to Scopus is quite. In Malaysia, it's all the 20 public universities and I think four or five private institutions as well. So there's no lack of access to Scopus. And being able to publish or get a profile in Scopus for an author is really dependent on being accepted by, manuscript is accepted by one of the many journals that's in Scopus. So that's not us that determines what's in the profile. It's really the peer review process of the journals.
Yeah, indeed. So maybe like my last questions. Like from your observation, like this all predatory publication, like is it most of them are like we talk about the hierarchy of the journal? Is it like more you observe in Q3 and Q4 journals, or even in Q1 also there's predatory journals?
To my knowledge, I would say mostly Q4.
Q4, so
with some exceptions. So I would say to the institutions, if they made a KPO that said that incentivized researchers to publish mostly Q1 through 3, I think they would see less of these problems. That said, Q4 is there for a reason. Not all journals that have lower citation performance are ethically unsound journals, right? So
Mhm.
we include Q4 because a lot of the topics, sometimes there's niche journals and topics that are covered that might not be highly cited, but are still, good information for the research ecosystem to have access to. Some of them might be local language, so the citations are not, coming quite as easy as maybe journals that are in English. Does that mean we should de-index them if they are genuine journals with a editorial board that has people with a good reputation and they're doing a proper peer review and so forth, right? So there's a reason for Q4 being there. But I do think there's that correlation. I haven't seen the data. It's something that I've been thinking about asking to look at our list of all the, and probably you can do it manually. If you just download the list of discontinued journals and then look at the site score and see what quartile they were in when they were discontinued.
Okay.
Oh.
I think we have like last minute questions actually from the participants. So one of it from Sui Chan. So she, I don't know, I think I'm apologize if I have a wrong gender here, but this person mentioned like, does open access equal to low quality, or is it even like open access inviting you for high rate of predatory publishing?
No, open access does not mean low quality. There are many very high quality journals that are doing open access, including Elsevier and Springer and Nature and so forth. So there are certainly some top journals that are doing either full or hybrid open access. So open access is absolutely not related to low quality, but it is used as a model for it has made predatory publishing easier because they can get their payment up front.
I do agree because like in my case as well, like when I'm publishing Q1 paper, like they have option, you go for open access or non-open access. Of course, it depends of your financial resources. You will go open access, but then yeah, I mean we found it even like in Q1 journals. Okay, next question we have from Habibullah bin Ramli. So he asked, should we not judge an article by its worth instead of by its journal? Because the job of researcher is to challenge whatever findings by other researchers, so it should not matter where is it published. I think it's more a concern like why the paper being evaluated by the journals, not the individual article itself.
Well, there are a lot of evaluation methods that do look at the individual journals and individual papers and don't look at the journals necessarily. So when a funding body or a university is looking at the performance of a researcher, they might do a citation analysis. Like an H-index also ignores the quartile of the journal. They might look at how many very highly cited papers do you have? Now, you could have a paper that's published in a Q4 journal that's incredibly highly cited, and that would count equally as a Q1 published paper that's highly cited and so forth. But whatever analysis you do is usually based on some foundation of journals, right? So when MOE or IIUM or whoever does an analysis, they might choose to base that on Scopus. They might choose to base it on, I don't know, Web of Science. You might choose to base it on Google Scholar, whatever you want. So if a journal is included or not included, of course, if the journal is not included in the database, then the papers would not be included in the profile and not be included in that analysis. And therein lies the thing. But I understand the sentiment that, hey, if I have a good paper and it happens to be published by a journal that, hey, maybe even it was predatory, what we see is that some journals which have become predatory, some of the papers they published are pretty good. Like, they're good quality papers. And they probably would have made it through a genuine peer review. And that's part of the reason why we try to leave the older content in the database unless we see big problems with it, right? So I completely understand that. But at the same time, everyone will make a decision about what journals should be included in an analysis or included in a database or included in Myra, or there's always going to be those decisions. So it's a bit unavoidable.
Okay, I think this will be our last question. This question actually related to why this topic will be discussed. Like, simple as Abdullah Birami asked, like, why should we believe press released by Elsevier? Because also it is part of in the publication industry as well. We have ACS, we have Nature, we have Springer. So why, researchers should believe the list that have been provided by you?
Let me see if I understand the question.
I mean, because they're kind of like maybe questions from researchers like, oh, perhaps you just make up of this list, or because of you want to kind of like challenge the other publisher like Nature, ACS, and so forth, or like why they should put kind of like this kind of like trust to the list that being provided by you. I mean, like I'm not questioning, but just like how
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
No, fair enough. I think that we don't really publish a list of what journals are predatory. What we do is publish a list of which journals are active in Scopus and which ones are not. And the ones that are not active in Scopus either have been removed because the quality declined too much, or there were ethical concerns such as predatory publishing. But we don't indicate which ones were necessarily which ones are predatory, although we do give a category of like this journal was discontinued because of publication concerns. Why should you trust what we're saying? Because we have a very robust process to evaluate the journals. And it's done by, again, a content selection advisory board, 17 very, very prominent researchers that are taking quantitative information about the publications as well as qualitative as subject matter experts. They're looking at the papers that are published. They're looking at the editorial board, whether the people who run the journal are legitimate, high quality researchers. They're looking at what type of peer review is being done. They're looking at, is there a regular publication schedule, and so forth. So it's a really detailed analysis of every single journal that's in Scopus. So I think you can assign some value or some trust to the result of that, in terms of us saying these are the titles which are active in Scopus. These are the ones which used to be active, but we've removed for various reasons. Is that a perfect representation of predatory publishing? It's not. And that's part of what we're talking about today, is that it's not quite as black and white as everyone wants it to be. And therefore, all of you as researchers have to kind of participate in this process and in this dialogue. There's no perfect answer. Like, this is what you do, and then everything's simple.
Yeah, it's a continuous process. It's not like a direct, but then it will keep continued. Like support from both parties, I think we'll have for determine this one. I mean, there's one more from Nur and Rabai. Like, I mean, this one I'll be asking, like, for those who might accidentally publish in the Predatory journal, is there any chance for them to, I mean, like, if that journal be withdrawn, can they submit or publish a similar article in another legit journal? Or it's already like, because you already published once, even the Predatory, you can't anymore?
Yeah, I think that if you can retract it before it gets published, perhaps, but most journals won't want to consider a manuscript once it's online somewhere. And if it's predatory journal, they're not going to take your paper down, right? And you can't litigate. So a lot of these are based in, it might be a journal that's based in India or in Russia or a different country where you simply can't litigate or force them to do anything. So I think that once your paper is up somewhere, it's pretty hard to get down. So if you think it's predatory and you've submitted to them, try and stop it before it gets online. And if it's not online, then I think you have the right to submit it elsewhere.
Okay, thank you again, Alexander, for your time. I think that's pretty much of sharing of knowledge, and from your side, from Asvia's side, I mean, a lot of researchers and those who participate with us today really appreciate what we have. I think, like, at the end, we as the researchers and from in academia or from industry as well, like, you doing research, you need to take more careful, I mean, be diligent in terms of, like, before you publish something, check everything, not just being pushed by your peers or being pushed by the KPI and so forth, just to make sure that whatever has been published will be evaluated and have value throughout the scientific world. So again, thank you very much on behalf of IUN Library. I'll thank you, Alexander, for becoming our respectful guest for today and sharing your knowledge with us. Thank you again. So for all participants today, thank you for your time and joining us on our online talk organized by IUM Darikma Library. So please, if you have any comments or any feedbacks, you may fill up the form. It's available on at the bottom highlights there, and then will be shared as well on the YouTube chat box. Feel free to give suggestion. So if you have any topics you would like us to discuss, or any particular person that we like to invite to talk or discuss with, feel free to give that comments. We are welcome with. So I think we already like almost 11:30. So I think we have met our time for today. So thank you again for participating with us. For IUM members, please do fill up the attendance form, which will be available on the YouTube chat box. So then your attendance will be recorded and be rewarded with the CTG points. So thank you again, everyone. Inshallah, we shall meet again in the next event. And then, of course, for Malaysian and those not from Malaysia as well, please follow SOP, your country SOPs. I mean, the COVID-19 situation is still not settled yet. We have still a huge war against COVID-19. Please follow SOPs. And for those who have not registered for vaccination, please do register it now. And then hopefully, inshallah, we shall win this fight against COVID-19. Thank you again. And I'm Zat Sufyan, Biaf IM Library. Thank you again for participation, and we shall see you again next time. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and have a great Tuesday.